When Daniel pushed his key into the lock, it resisted like a stranger refusing a handshake. He frowned, jiggled it, tried again. The door opened, but not with the hollow echo of an empty house. Voices drifted from inside, soft, careful, the sound of people trying not to exist too loudly. He stepped in slowly. A woman stood frozen in the hallway, one arm instinctively around a little boy, the other reaching back toward a girl who clutched a worn backpack like armor. All three stared at him with the same expression, the look of people who had already rehearsed fear. I think you're in the wrong house, Daniel said, though even he didn't believe it. His mother's old clock ticked on the wall. His father's shoes were still by the door. Everything was familiar, except them. The woman swallowed. We were told it was empty just until winter passed. We were going to leave no trace. Daniel noticed the careful order of everything. Blankets folded tight, shoes lined neatly, a single pot soaking in the sink. No sign of taking, only surviving. What's your name? He asked, voice quieter now. Mara. The boy pressed his face into her coat. The girl stared directly at Daniel, fierce and silent, like a guard dog in a child's body. He should have called someone. The law was simple. The house was his now. He had every right. But then the boy coughed, a deep, rattling sound that didn't belong in a child's chest. Mara flinched as if the sound itself were an apology. He's been sick, she whispered. The cold makes it worse. Daniel set his bag down slowly. How long have you been here? 3 weeks. We tried shelters. There was no space. I just needed a roof for them. Silence stretched between them. Not tense. Heavy. The kind that presses on your ribs. Daniel walked into the kitchen. The cupboards were nearly empty except for rice and a single can of soup. On the counter sat a small stack of drawings. Crayon houses, bright suns, stick figures holding hands. He exhaled. When he returned, the children hadn't moved. They watched him like the verdict of their lives rested in his next sentence. You can stay, he said quietly, for now. Mara's eyes widened, not with relief, but disbelief. Hope looked unfamiliar on her face, like a language she had forgotten how to speak. That night, Daniel lay awake listening to the unfamiliar rhythm of breathing down the hall. The house creaked, but it didn't feel abandoned anymore. For the first time since inheriting it, the silence wasn't empty, and though he didn't know it yet, the moment he chose not to close the door would change far more than who slept under his roof. Winter arrived harder than expected. The wind found every weakness in the house, thin window frames, old pipes, loose boards that whispered all night. Work slowed for Daniel, and bills began stacking on the kitchen table with quiet persistence. He told no one how tight things had become. He was used to carrying silence alone. But the house was no longer a place where silence stayed untouched. Mara repaired what she could. She mended curtains with thread pulled from an old scarf. She patched Daniel's worn coat without being asked. Each stitch was small and precise, like she believed care itself could hold things together. Lena rarely spoke, but she organized everything. Spoons aligned perfectly, shoes paired at exact angles. She counted steps in the hallway, lips moving silently, as if order could protect them from uncertainty. Noah filled the spaces between worry with laughter. Even when his cough returned, sharp, heavy, frightening, he smiled afterward, embarrassed by the attention. Daniel found himself listening for that laugh the way one listens for light in a storm. One evening, Daniel came home to a warmth he hadn't felt in years. The living room was clean, polished, a blanket draped neatly over the chair where he always sat. The faint smell of soup simmered in the air. You didn't have to do this, he said. Mara shook her head gently. A place that protects you deserves respect. He wanted to argue that it was only a house, but it no longer felt like one. Weeks later, exhaustion finally caught him. Daniel collapsed at work and woke hours later in his own bed, weak and disoriented. On the table beside him sat medicine, water, and a folded note in careful handwriting. Rest. We are here. He turned his head and saw Noah asleep in a chair, small hand wrapped around Daniel's sleeve as if guarding him from something unseen. "You should have told us you were struggling," Mara said quietly from the doorway. Daniel almost laughed. He had spent years believing strength meant needing nothing. Yet here, surrounded by quiet care he had never asked for, that belief felt fragile. They had arrived as strangers seeking shelter. But somewhere between shared meals, repaired walls, and unspoken kindness, something had shifted. They had not taken his home. They had returned it to him. Spring came early that year, bringing thawed earth and difficult news. Mara had found stable housing across town, safer, permanent. Daniel congratulated her. His voice sounded right. His chest did not. On their last morning, Lena handed him a folded sheet of paper. Inside was a drawing, 4 figures standing in front of a house. Above them, a wide yellow sun. Beneath, in careful letters, "Home is where someone waits for you." After they left, the silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It carried echoes of footsteps, soft laughter, the memory of warmth in cold rooms. Weeks later, Daniel replaced the front door lock. Not to keep people out, but to protect what the house had become.